everybody. Hope you're doing marvellously well. Sitting here with the rather wonderful Mr. Stephen Lipson. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well. Thank you.
Good. We've just been chatting off camera here. So what's interesting is I said I wanted to know about your journey, about how you got here. And you were like, well, I don't think it's going to be very interesting because I didn't have any formal training. And I said, well, that's exactly why I think so many people are going to find it interesting. You grew up in North London. Did you have music in your family? I mean, what drew you to music?
Well, my brother was a drummer in a band. He must have got a drum kit around 13. And so I started playing his drum kit so I could, figure that, and then bought a guitar. My parents bought me an acoustic guitar on holiday, a £5 guitar, which I had no idea what to do. The first song was The Kinks, You Really Got Me, and I could only play it on one string. And in order to get the right, I remember I had a knife and I cut holes in the frets so I could see where I should play this very simple song. Anyway, the guitar fell apart, and luckily I managed to acquire another one. So from 8, really, I was playing guitar. Early start, yeah. But no good. I've never really been very good. A bit of a bluffer at everything. So then friends, school bands. And then one got kind of serious. 3 of us had this great idea, concept, and we're happening, and we get offered a deal. And from our recordings that we did on a 2-track tape machine in the bedroom with a drum box, got offered a really big deal and blew it by being too greedy. And then one thing and another happened. They both got deals, and I was doing sessions for a friend who made jingles. And one day I said to him, my guitar always sounds terrible. I wish I knew what those guys were doing. I didn't even know what an engineer was, but they sat behind gear. And I was saying to him, if I knew what all that stuff was, I could sound much better. And he said to me, well, it's a funny thing you say that, because I've just bought a building and there's 1,000 square feet in the basement, which I'd considered turning into a studio. Would you be interested in going 50-50? I'll supply money and property, and you do everything. And we'll go 50-50. And of course, that was a no-brainer. I had exactly a year to the day, to build a working studio and figure how to work it before the first session. And from a position of knowing literally nil, I had to do this and ended up with some hopeless place. But it kind of worked. The detail is very amusing, but we don't have time. And over the next few months, it became incredibly successful. And we leased a load of good gear, and it was full 24 hours a day.
Incredible. What was the name of the studio?
It was called the Regent's Park Recording Company. And it was a church hall in St. John's Wood, right by
beautiful
the tube
part of
station.
town.
Beautiful building.
Gorgeous.
Still there. Yeah, it was great. And then we fell out over money, as you do. I lucked out quite early on, produced a single, ended up being called the producer. I was the engineer, but ended up being called the producer of a top 10 American hit with this group called Sniff and the Tears. And they asked me to do their second album. And he said to me, if you don't do it here, we need to figure a monetary solution to this. Maybe, he said, will the studio take 80% and you keep 20%? And I said to him, that does sound a little bit like the wrong way round. By that time, we had other engineers and assistants. It was full on happening. And so we fell out. It didn't make sense to me. And I thought this was my, I was going to hit the big time. But the album flunked completely. But the single was revelatory to me, because you wouldn't know the song. It was called Driver's Seat, and it was based around 3 chords, and with two amazing guitar players who played these riffs all the way through the song. And while we started to mix it, I had this idea of muting the guitars when the vocal happened, so that the riff came in, the two riffs came in when he stopped singing. And I'd never realized you could use a mute button like this. It hadn't occurred to me. Even faders, I didn't really, come to grips with moving faders in a mix. So that was a little bit later. But the mute button, what a thing. It was extraordinary. And because I was a musician and these riffs happened in really weird places, like for and, the riff would start and it was playing all the way out to it. And another riff would start on the beat. So I had to open one on for and, open the other one on the one. And I could do it because I could hear the guitar in my head and I'd do the mutes and then mute them in the right place at the end. And they freaked out, of course. This changed the whole song. And anyway, we did the mix. It was a hit. Did their next album, complete turkey. I was terrible. It was okay, but I didn't really have a handle on it at all. But was suddenly realized that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a record producer. And I hated this engineering. It just felt like it got in the way. It somehow got in the way of everything. To earn a living, I had to do freelance engineering, and I did pretty well. I was a favorite, like number one on the list of engineers for a bunch of studios. And so I got a whole load of work. And then from that, people would take me elsewhere. And I ended up working with a lot of big acts and for a few years and kind of earned a living. But while that was going on, desperate to produce stuff. So I'd somehow wangle free time here and, what people do. And nothing ever happened. And then one day I was recording an album. We were coming to the end of this album. It's quite an exciting album. A really revolutionary album. A guy called Eddie Phillips, he used to be in a group called The Creation, he was the first guy to use a violin bow on a guitar. He was a really interesting guy, and it was a concept. So we were coming up to mixing this thing. We'd taken a year because I kept having to go off and earn a living. And this was in a friend's studio. A phone call comes through. Would I engineer for Trevor for 2 days?
Trevor Horn, presumably.
Trevor Horn. He was a jobbing bass player that I knew. My jingle partner, he used him on quite a few sessions. So I knew Trevor, moody guy. And and he suddenly had all these hits like Dollar and ABC and Buggles. And I was seething with jealousy. So when the phone call came through,
I like your honesty.
I was. He'd happened, and I wasn't happening. In retrospect, I know why I wasn't happening. I was sort of self-destruct. That thing of, I don't want anyone to hear it because I don't have the confidence. It was just rubbish. Anyway, so 2 days, I thought, I'll do 2 days. And then get back to what I'm enjoying. Secretly, I loved his records, but in the sort of front of me, I hated his records, And
sure.
so I got there, and I decided he wanted me to engineer, but I didn't like engineering, so I thought I'd do whatever I wanted. I wasn't interested in him instructing me on what to do. He loved it. He loved the fact that I did whatever I wanted to do because he's great at building teams, right? And giving people free rein to do whatever they do, which is how he gets great results. Because people feel confident in their own ability around him. And that's... Anyway, so there were 3 of us there, new people. Oh, were there 3? No, actually, it was just me and Andy Richards because JJ it'd been with him for a while. And... it was Relax. Then it turned into the album, and I was playing guitar. He was out at dinner or something, and I was playing on, it was Ferry Cross the Mersey, which was a B-side to Relax, possibly. Actually, this was before Relax. We were doing this before he knew I could play. And, well, he knew, but he'd forgotten. And so I was playing a guitar part, and he walked in. He said, who's playing guitar? And I said, I am. He went, I didn't know you could play. And I said, Trevor, I did tell you that I could play. And anyway, whatever, let's get back to what we're doing. Next day, he comes in and goes, we're starting the Relax again, because he'd suddenly clocked guitar player, keyboard player. He had a Lindrum and the Fairlight. Let's just start again. And within one evening, we came up with the version we all know of Relax. Me playing guitar, Andy, JJ on the Fairlight, and Trevor with his Lindrum. And from then on, I played on everything. And the engineering sort of took care of itself. It took a bit of a back seat, which he found amusing, but had a problem with me mixing to begin with, because he thought I didn't know what I was doing, because the engineering was sort of by the by, and he thought that I wasn't the person to mix what we were doing. So I think he got Julian Mendelssohn to mix the singles for Relax and Two Tribes, after which I mixed everything. But that was, and then on we go, and we ended up co-producing a load of stuff just because. And I did loads of acts for the record company.
For those of us obviously in the UK, it's hard to, you can't really overstate just how important that period was. ZTT, Trevor Horn, those productions, those songs. It was like, there was a period of about 2 years where it was just like interchangeable #1 singles.
Yeah. It was extraordinary. And working at that studio at the time was extraordinary, because the other rooms were all happening big time. We'd watch Top of the Pops. Do you remember Top of the Pops?
Of course, very well. I grew up on it, yes.
Yeah, well, nearly every song was recorded at the studio. So we'd be very blasé about the sort of the hit quotient, you know. It was expected, yet not people didn't get big-headed about it. It was just a hit factory, to use Stock Aitken and Waterman's term. But it kind of was.
Both Two Tribes and Relax, I've got just massive bass parts on it. Obviously, the Relax is dun, 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 which, you know, dun, 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 and that would be you on the guitar on that little call and response. And then, of course, Two Tribes, dum, 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 dum. I haven't heard those songs in 30 years, and I can still sing them back.
Oh, actually, you're singing the guitar part.
Oh, is that you playing the guitar part? The dum, dum,
yeah, it was me playing the guitar.
Oh, wow.
It was a harmony. It was, you know, sometimes you have a bit of a moment, like, oh, that's good. And so we were just running it through at, funny enough, at the studio that I was working in when I got the phone call to go and work with him. It was this little studio in Fulham, very small place, and we decided to start the second single there to just get a plan. And so we had a rhythm, just a loop, and everyone was messing about. And I came up with this guitar part, and it was weird because everything got replaced apart from the guitar part. And it was just he kept doing that with me over the years. I'd be just fiddling around, and he'd go, well, that's it. There was one thing on Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. Do you know that
of course, yeah.
song?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Very well.
So there's like a jazz solo in it, a jazz guitar solo towards the end somewhere. That track came about because I discovered this thing of copying and offsetting audio with 2 digital tape machines, which it was revolutionary. Nobody had a clue what was going on. But I've calculated what the offset should be and quadrupled the length of the song. Trevor walked in and freaked out. He said, what have you done? How have you done this? And of course, that opened the floodgates to everything. You know, the ability to offset and copy and paste, like we take for granted. It was a bit more involved. But there was a section we didn't know what to do with. And I was standing on the other side of the console. So, you know, with my head between the little speakers, and I had my guitar, and the track was really quiet. And I said to my assistant, just play from wherever it was, a few bars before I was thinking, and it was whisper quiet. And I said, so this section here, you could do this kind of jazz solo, something. And I'm talking to him about this jazz solo, how it could be. And while I'm talking, I'm playing it. And it came to an end. And he said to the assistant, "Did you take that?" "Yes." "Well, let's hear that back." "Oh, that'll do." That was the solo. It was just really weird. It's not a particularly good, it's not great playing, but it just was, it worked. He used to do that all the time. Slave to the Rhythm, loads of that went on. Okay, so you might know that piece. That was me demonstrating the new software. That's all that was. I was talking to someone about it the other day, and it was a guy from he was a university lecturer, and part of music and part of his syllabus, I believe, I might have this wrong, and it doesn't matter really, was to do with that. And he had a kind of theory about it, how it came about. I don't know. But when I told him, he got a little bit disappointed. He thought it was a lot of effort had gone into it, and it had been planned, and it was nothing, which, of course, is how most or a lot of good things happen.
I would love to talk about a bit of Grace Jones, because obviously Island Life is such an incredible piece of production.
We only did Slave to the Rhythm.
You only did Slave to the Rhythm? Well,
yeah.
If you're only going to do one song, it might as well be that one.
Well, it was a whole album of one song. So to talk about Slave to the Rhythm, it's a whole thing. It started as a up-tempo track, which is on the album. And it was for Frankie Goes to Hollywood, written by these two guys, Bruce Woolley and Simon Darlow. And it didn't work for Frankie, and Chris Blackwell heard it and said, "This would be good for Grace, but it needs to be a go-go rhythm." And we didn't know what that meant. So Bruce wrote a version to a go-go rhythm, which I think there's a version of on the record probably without Grace. It didn't work at all. We get out to New York to record the assembled go-go musicians, and we hear them jamming, which I happened to record, and realized we got the rhythm completely wrong, but managed to acquire some drums on their own with the percussion. They were in a booth together. So we got a little bit of that, and then wrote the song in the hotel. That's what happened. We found the rhythm and then wrote the song to the rhythm and edited that multi-track method I told you about with Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. We did on their rhythm, basically. We got 2 bars of drums, looped it up, which took a day, you can imagine, copying, offset, copying back, drop-in's not right, do it. And so it went from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, 32, 64, 128. And we go, well, that's probably enough, but it's dead boring. So now we have to do, and then we'd find another bit and drop it in, but dropping it in meant that we had to redo the bit afterwards, and then an edit, we'd do an edit, and that meant copy. Anyway, so it took 4 or 5 days to assemble this drum track, and with all the time with Bruce and me and Trevor playing. I don't know if Trevor was playing. Was he? Yes, he was playing the keyboard. No, he wasn't. Bruce was. Whatever. The 3 of us were in New York messing about at the power station at $5,000 for 8 hours with 2 tape machines that cost a fortune. I mean, it was insane. And in the meantime, Jim Steinman in the next room like a maniac, but that's a whole other story. And so when we got back to London, Trevor decided that the loop, which sounded pretty good, he goes, "It's not right." And I'm thinking, what's wrong with the loop? He goes, the second bar rushes, so we can't possibly use it. Yeah, but it sounds good. No, we can't use it. Okay, we can't use it, right? right, we need to come up with another version. So I ended up in a broom cupboard with the synclavier, this weird instrument, coming up with a version. We listen, it's not bad. And in the meantime, we're going to record an orchestra on the high-speed version. And so Richard Niles, he's done an orchestration for the high-speed version and this version without which Trevor doesn't like. We go to the studio to record the orchestra. It's a 3-hour session, 2 hours 45 spent on the high-speed version. And at the end, we kind of go, well, let's just put the other one down. You've done the arrangement. We'll do one take. Do one take. That's that. Put it to bed. Don't listen to it. Do all the other bits and pieces. And by the end of a year, we go back to the original version that's got this weird... And Trevor goes, oh, actually, it sounds quite good. Let's mix that as well. And that became the single.
And that was the original, the go-go rhythm that you had?
Yeah. But so we went all around the houses and ended up where we started. But by that time, she was out of a contract, and it became very messy. The whole thing was very messy, which is why it didn't do that well, because it was released on Island Manhattan ZTT, and nobody was prepared to pay for any promo because they weren't going to make any money from it. And the album never recouped, and on and on. So everyone likes the album, I gather, but it was actually mayhem, really.
But the single itself was huge.
Not really.
Really?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've been to into mix rooms that I don't know. I was at Focal in Saint Etienne about 2 years ago in their, big hi-fi room where they have these grand Utopia speakers, which are like £250,000 or something like that. And between it's like one of 4 songs that you always play. If you're going to test hi-fi, put Slave to the Rhythm on, yeah.
Well, there's a magazine here, I think in America too, called Sound on Sound.
Of course, yeah.
And I got a guy wanted to interview me for it, and it's about how did you get the best sound or something, an explanation. There's a column in Sound on Sound now, and people give these great big, and I put the thing in the toilet, and I went through the whatever it is.
Stood on one leg and scratched my head.
Yeah. And then he played it, with different tuning, with special, all this stuff. But the guy asked me, he said, will you do this? I said, yeah, I'll do it. I said, you probably won't use it, but I'll do it. And so he does this sort of thing, a Zoom call. And I said, well, funny enough, all my best sounds required nil effort. They're all the best sounds. And he goes, I don't understand. What do you mean? I said, well, Slave to the Rhythm. The guy was playing drums. The mics were on the kit. I pushed the faders up. That was the drum sound. That was it. Nothing happened to the drum sound. And in the mix, might have been, whatever you do in a mix, a bit of top or something. Nothing really. That was it. So, and I said I could cite so many examples of that, of the best sound requiring nil effort. Because, which often the best ideas required nil effort. This thing, I don't know, that's just my experience.
No,
which is,
I relate.
So I said to him, I said, you're probably not going to use it. And so far he hasn't used it.
Well, I'm definitely going to do a piece on it. I think it's a masterpiece of production, and the mix is beautiful. Did you mix that one?
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. An incredible mix. And trust me, it's funny because I was talking to Bob Clearmountain, and I told him that Woman in Chains is like a staple for mixers to reference, and so Slave to the Rhythm. And what's really interesting is he's like, really? People, you listen to Women in Chains? And I'm telling you, Slave to Rhythm is another one of those songs. And, it's nice to see they're both bemused by that. Because
yeah, somewhat. Funny enough, there is a song that I listened to in rooms that I did.
Which one?
It's by Prefab Sprout.
Love that band.
And it's called The Sound of Crying.
Oh, I remember that song. Yeah.
It sounds great to me. And it's another one of those ridiculous things where I ended up, apart from the drums, Paddy might have played a keyboard, but it was just me messing about. And when it came to the bass, I remember it like yesterday. I said to Martin McAloon, Paddy's brother, who's the bass player, okay, you're going to do a bass on this. And in his glorious, I love their accents, I think in Newcastle, he said, I haven't got a clue. I have no idea. And I said, well, why don't you plug in and try something? And he very nicely said to me, why don't you plug in and try something? I went, all right, I'll plug in and try something. So I promise you, this is exactly what happened. Record this. I had no idea what to do. Literally no idea. Track starts and I'm fiddling around. And the first thing I did, I thought, well, I'll repeat that. That's kind of nice. And then what am I going to do here? Oh, I need to straighten it out a bit here. Oh, okay. Well, the second verse, I'll do what I did in the first verse. That was quite nice. And it was just me fiddling around. A couple of mistakes we fixed. And that ended up being the bass. And for some reason, because I wasn't thinking about it, it sounded great. I wasn't, when I'm thinking about it, I kind of mute it or whatever. I get all busy with the thing. But this was just pick it up. Can you hear it? I can hear it. Great. Okay. Da 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 da. Boom boom. Whatever it was, this part. And it was played in a very sort of twangy way, but had loads of, I can't remember what the bass was. It must have been my Padula, whatever it was. So the track is quite empty. And Neil Conti, fabulous drummer, great drummer. For years, he was my favorite ever drummer. Now Ash Sohn is my favorite ever drummer, but Neil was amazing. And, he had this way of being so nonchalant and had good attack, but wasn't too loud. Anyway, the song sounds great to me. So that's my go-to wherever I go.
I'm going to go and listen to it after this interview and reacquaint myself. Right. It's funny to talk about Richard Niles, because Richard was kind of a mainstay of that period, like ABC, Ultravox, he did strings on everything. Depeche Mode, I remember him being on that. I hadn't thought about it. Is he still around?
Yeah, he lives in, I think, LA.
Oh, he does?
I think so.
I should try him. Well, I'm definitely going to do some of the songs he worked on, so I should try and get a hold of him. And
well, he was interesting because he would never play his arrangement until we got to the session, which was always a bit weird because ideally you want to go through it with the arranger, whatever it is, because it's an expensive exercise, but not
Absolutely.
Richard. And so with loads of the songs actually we did with Richard, it was always a shock hearing what he'd done. It was always outrageous, too much. You'd never have thought of doing so much. So there was quite a lot of muting and shifting going on, but brilliant, absolutely brilliant, yet completely out of control. It was great. He's extraordinary, really.
Pet Shop Boys. Did you use him on the Pet Shop Boys?
Yeah. Left to my own devices. Yeah, it was so good. We opened the record with it, offset, put it at the front. And then the third verse of that, I mean, what he does in that third verse is mental. I mean, it's just so inappropriately brilliant. Hang on, let me just see if I can find the bit. You'll see what I mean.
Distant feet, Che Guevara and Debussy to a disco beat.
Yeah, this verse.
It's not a crime when you look the way you do, the way I like to picture you. When I get home,
this second half,
it's later tonight. I pour a drink and watch the fight. Turn off the TV, look at a book, pick up the phone, fix some food. Maybe I'll sit up all night and day, waiting for the minute I hear you say.
I mean, I remember when we heard it, Trevor and me are in the control room going, what's he done now? But it's great. It's just excess. It's good, really good.
Brings a whole different energy and makes that verse just feel completely special.
Oh, yeah. Like
gives you another reason to press
tension.
play again.
Yeah, there's this weird tension. It's like sort of Hammer horror or Hitchcock or something.
How did you end up working with Annie?
Well, it was a weird one. It was one of those moments in life that was, I don't know, it was a great moment. I was producing Simple Minds, who at the time were one of the biggest acts in the world. And,
Absolutely.
And I was coming, I can't remember what stage of the album, but a friend of mine, who I'd known from before either of us were anything. I'm up in Scotland working on this Simple Minds album.
Beautiful.
And the guy goes, there's someone on the phone for you. His name's Simon Fuller. Oh, Simon Fuller, can I? And I'm going, oh, it's not a good time. And I ummed and ahed. And I went, oh, you know what, I'll take the call. And I picked the phone up and he goes, how are you, matey? Loveliest man alive. Most gorgeous man. I said, I'm fine. A bit in the middle of it. He said, I've just got to tell you the great news. What's the great news? I've just been asked to manage Annie Lennox. And will you make her album? And I went, yes. Yes, I will. Okay. Can you come and meet her this weekend? Yeah, I'll fly down. So I'm working with Simple Minds. And now my next job is going to be Annie Lennox. And I'm going, this is insane.
Doesn't get any better.
Doesn't get any better. Both Scottish, which is a bit weird.
Both Scottish, yes.
Yeah. But the interesting thing was that when I was at Sarm, Jill Sinclair said to me, anyone at all, who would you want to work with? And I said, oh, it's easy. I want to work with the singer out of the Eurythmics. She said, why? I said, I'm not keen on the guy. You know, what he does. It was just her and me. And I was being silly because obviously he's great. I know that. I said, not keen on the guy. I like her. I work with her. And she's going, oh yeah, like fat chance. Anyway, so it was serendipity. And so I went to meet her on a Saturday. I was exhausted because we used to take the shuttle up and down from Glasgow to Heathrow. Oh, I was really tired because we'd had a late night and I had to get up early and get to the airport and get on the shuttle and then get to Heathrow and then get... So I get to her house and she invites me and she's very, very polite and we sit in the room and she plays me a demo. I went, oh yeah, that's good. I'm not very good on first listening. You know, I have to be honest. Need to hear things a few times, generally. And... so she played me a bunch of demos. I said, yeah, they all sound really good. Not, wow! It was all a bit muted. And anyway, I went home. She said, nice to meet you. Went home. And Simon called me the next day and said, she doesn't want to work with you. I said, why? And he said, because she doesn't think you like her music. I said, I don't know her music. Of course, I'll do anything. What can I do? And he goes, well, call her. So I called her. It was the most excruciating thing. I said, I'm so sorry. I was exhausted. I'll do anything. You know, I want to make your album, please. Oh, all right then. So we start. And she wants to do it at home. So we set up a studio at the top of her house at home. Three of us. It was the guy, my engineer, who I worked with for years, Hef Moraes, Peter Vitesi, who was my favourite, brilliant keyboard player, and myself. And we sat at the top of her house making this album, only half of which she'd written. It was just an extraordinary experience. Finally, the neighbours got the hump, and we moved to Mayfair and finished the album at Mayfair. Anyway, that was the first album. And then come the second album, she started it, I think. I can't remember. And they asked me to remix No More I Love Yous. And I listened to her. I said, it's not very good. What do you mean it's not very good? This could be so much better. You think? Well, have a go. So that was, you know, off we went. And I had a go. And it went well. And then we flew out to her house in Mallorca, where we set up a studio. And made it there. And then the third album, actually, after the first, we did a bunch of shows, which she wanted me to MD, which is all a bit weird for me. I mean, good fun, but not my thing really. It worked really well. It was good. And we did a live DVD in Central Park. Annie Lennox, I can't remember what it was called. And a bunch of other shows. Lots of interesting experiences. And then the second album. And then the third album. In between, we did loads of singles and B-sides and stuff. We did a lot of stuff together. But by the end of the third album, we had disagreements because we were quite familiar, as you can imagine. And we had these weird disagreements that were just inevitable, really. But she used to say things like, there was this song I loved. It was, I've got it here, this one. She hated what I'd done. She said, what's with this? Keeps going like that, this snare. Turn it down, take it out or something. I said, it's great. It's great. It's jaunty. It's got a great feel. And the bass, what's with the bass? It's the bass. The bass is to die for. It was just one of those stupid parts I'd done. Really simple bass part with a big sound. She said, I don't like that. And she came up with this other bass part. Or something. And I said, oh, no. Well, I'll put it in the end. So there's a little phrase of it at the end. And that, for me, was the sort of disassembly of our relationship because we just disagreed, basically, on how the track should be. And because we had the familiarity, it wasn't right to work together again. She knew it, and I kind of knew it. And then she went off and made an album with the guy who did Alanis Morissette's album, Glenn Ballard, in LA. And I remember hearing that album and just sitting there going, I wouldn't have done that. Oh my God, they've missed a trick on this song. You know, it was a bitter, not bitter, but just a typical stupid reaction. I don't know how well it did.
I don't remember either. I do know that Diva, going back to Diva, is probably still her biggest album of her career. So Why, Walking on Broken Glass. I mean, there's so many incredible songs on that record.
It was good fun. It was good album to make. It was good. She's amazing. Amazing woman.
Incredible. I mean,
what a lovely woman.
Yeah, first time I heard, I remember The Tourists as a little kid, but I remember the first time I heard Sweet Dreams and watching the video and just being like, that was it. I was like, woman. I mean, to me, she was like the perfect woman. You know what I mean? Everything about her, that androgynous thing and just her voice, so expressive and so incredible.
And very purposeful. Interesting working with her as a singer because she's a great singer. But that's not worth telling her, if you know what I mean. What am I going to tell her that for? So that's an interesting thing.
Coaxing performances out of her, what would you do?
Several instances she would not guide us, but she'd go, all right, let's do this. And she'd sing the verse, okay, stop there, let me do it again. Lots of that going on, and we keep everything and comp it later. And there'd be input. I'd give her input. But the input was generally stuff like, you're singing too loud. Sing quietly. It was always about dynamics, my input with her. Rather than, you work what you got, and she's amazing. So what am I going to tell her? It was just about her dynamics. That was it. And the perfect example of that was Waiting in Vain on Medusa. I didn't want to do reggae. She had 2 reggae songs she wanted to do. And I kept saying, we can't do reggae. You're not a reggae artist. It's just going to sound like cheap white reggae. I want to do reggae. And it was an ongoing thing. And the outcome of it was we dumped one of the reggae songs and then she said, all right, we won't do reggae. And she got really upset. And I said, oh God, all right, we'll do Waiting in Vain. I need to figure a way of doing Waiting in Vain. I couldn't figure it. It just sounded so wrong to me. you know. And then, so that was this. That was my answer to reggae. It wasn't reggae. It was just, I couldn't figure what to do. So we did that. And I said, you've got to sing it really quietly, because she was belting this song out. I said, just sing it really delicately. And then when it gets to the chorus and you repeat the line 3 times, you build and you get louder and louder until the third one is, there's this intensity, and then you break out for the next bit, and then you back down for the verse. So that's the sort of input I give her, nothing else. But that album was a really extraordinary. We had a very strange moment. Do you know the song Downtown Lights by the Blue Nile? She decided she wanted to do a cover of it, and I couldn't figure how to start doing this song. I couldn't figure it, because it felt like the music was a bunch of, like the guy had played one note all the way, then another note. It felt like a bunch of monophonic synths. It didn't feel like someone had played the chords somehow. So I needed to figure what it was. And it took me days to analyze what they'd done to get the chords right. It was very difficult. And also to get a rhythm wasn't easy. So the rhythm I came up with was this. It was just a loop of some description. And all these weird, like a held chord that sort of moves, and it was really weird. Anyway, so we're doing it, and I had it from beginning to end. She said, all right, I'll sing it. I don't know it very well. So I synced up the Blue Niles version with ours, same tempo, and she'd listen to the few lines, learn them. First 2 lines she'd listened to, and she said, okay, I'm ready. And she went out and did this.
Sometimes I walk away when all I really wanna do.
That was all she knew. She did that, and the 3 of us, Hef, her and I, burst into tears. We literally burst into tears, the 3 of us. Never had a moment like that, because she sang it like trying to get it, the melody. So it wasn't like she was emoting or anything. She was just trying to get it right. But it sounded unbelievable. It just sounded like it was just a magical moment. It was one of those moments. And then we knew we'd get the thing done and it would work. It was very strange how we all felt just after 2 lines. It was very, very intimate with her. Working with Annie, it was a very intimate thing, because more so than most artists, and I can't really explain what I mean by that. It just felt, that's all I can say, it felt very intimate, especially the last album, Bear, because that was a sort of breakup album, and she, I remember she said it's everything's sad, and I trying to put a positive spin on it. I said, that's great. Let's make the saddest album anyone's ever made. That was my remit on it, which was a non-remit because it doesn't mean anything. But at least we got going. My remit on Diva, by the way, was remit. I say it's a funny thing to say, but I said, here's my thing. The guitarist has left the band, so let's do it with no guitar. What? I said, you're a keyboard player. Just concentrate on the keyboards. Don't worry about guitar. We ended up with a bit of guitar, but it was basically a keyboard album led by her and Peter. That was the sort of plot. It kind of worked, not really.
It worked great. It's a
but there's
massive
guitar.
album.
But there is guitar all over it. I couldn't resist.
You worked with Paul McCartney on Flowers in the Dirt.
Yes, with Trevor.
Who do I know that worked on that as well? Chris Whitten, the drummer. Didn't he work on that?
Oh, yeah, of course, with Robbie McIntosh. and Hamish Stewart.
Great musicians, yeah.
Oh, working with Mecca, unbelievable. I mean, you know, there's stuff that was a bit weird, but what a guy. What a guy. I couldn't think of anyone better to be in a band with. Have you seen those films? New films?
Oh, yeah. I've watched them all at least 3 times.
He was remarkable.
He was. Watching that, he comes... First thing I felt was like he has such a confidence to him during that whole process. And there he is. He's like got all of these songs. You're hearing like songs that weren't going to come out for 3 or 4 years on solo records. Like he's playing It's Another Day. He's playing like all of this stuff. And you realize he was just in it. He was at his absolute peak.
Yeah.
And yeah, because, you know, before that, Lennon had been the main songwriter, written about 60% of the songs up until about 65, 66. But then Paul starts taking over. And you can see he's
flying.
Flying, yeah.
Well completely. He was awe-inspiring. It's not that I thought the album was that good. I just think he is unbelievable.
Well, it's interesting. I know it's popular to dislike that album. It's always been my favorite Beatles album, even though it's not their best. Like, you know, Revolver or Abbey Road or Sgt. Pepper's are easily, quote unquote, better albums. But there's something I love about that. And then I went to Spotify the other day and I realized that 3 of the songs in their top 10 are from that record.
Which record? The White Album?
Let It Be. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because you got Let It Be, you got Long and Winding Road, and then you've got everything, of course, that George did as well. I mean, it's really quite silly that we forget that some of their best songs on that record might not be their best album. But yeah, I mean...
But he, so when he left the Beatles and went up to Scotland and had whatever it was, his 4-track, on his own, with no one else, did this. I mean...
Incredible.
Floors me. This is all him.
Yeah.
Baby, I'm amazed the way you love me all the time.
All my hairs are standing on end.
Yeah, every time. The man's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, you know, then you know the story. He apparently, you know, well, wasn't we weren't there, but yeah, he goes back. He's like in bed for like a month or something, just completely depressed because the band's broken up, and Linda's looking after him, and so he writes that song. Like, you, at my lowest point in my life, you took care of me, and he wrote Maybe I'm Amazed. I mean,
yeah, she was gorgeous, Linda.
Yeah,
so lovely. But that song Rough Ride was that was the one we liked, really, and that was a weird one because everything about that was surreal.
Bring it to me one more time.
That's him playing guitar and drums.
I needed a friend. I needed something that would be there in the end. All the rough ride to heaven. Wanna get inside. What will I do? Oh, on the rough ride to heaven. I wanna get inside.
Anyway, the thing about that song, we got there and I just bought a whole load of gear, right? I had these funny little racks I bought from the synthesizer company, whatever it was called, Jonathan Cole. I remember really well. There were these plastic racks, I think like, what would that be, 6 or 8U, and they stacked. And I had a drawer on one with a Yamaha RX-5 drum box. And I had a P.A.R.C.E. it was so sort of mad. Anyway, I set it up on the console at the end, the producer bit. I was supposed to be engineering, but Hef, who turned into my engineer for years, he came down to assist, and so he sat in the driver's seat, and I set this gear up, and Trevor, the idea was Trevor said, I'll go and chat with Paul, we'll figure what we're going to do. And he comes down and he said, I found a song, it'll work really well with that rhythm you've got in your Yamaha drum box, because we had programming rooms years and years before anyone. Trevor and I had these 2 programming rooms opposite Sarm in Basing Street in an apartment. And I'd been fiddling around with the gear, and he'd been in the other room fiddling around. And I had this stuff that I'd recorded with my new gear, my sparkling new gear. And he said, we can use that rhythm. I went, okay. And I had this mad bass sound as well that was... whatever, a bass sound. I had a little keyboard, and so played me the song, and I went, oh, I get it. Yeah, okay. So he said, Macca picks up a guitar, starts playing the guitar, and Trevor's got a keyboard, and I've got the rhythm, and I got this bass sound. And we spend the day going through this song with me playing the bass, with Macca looking at me while I'm playing. It was the weirdest experience. Not only that, but because I had the drum box, when I hit stop, everything stops, right? So it's like I'm the governor of the session. It was a very strange feeling with Paul McCartney in the room and all his guys. He's got a roadie and an assistant, and they're all there. Paul, he's great. We know he's great, but they anyway. And so we're running through it again and again and again, and it came to some weird, I don't know what made me do it. I hit stop, and I said, the thing is, we keep going through this song, and the bridge, middle 8, whatever you call it, it's not very good. And his guys look at me like this. They're going, no, this is Paul McCartney you're talking about. You can't say that. And I suddenly realized I've overstepped here. This is not good. And Macca's looking at me much the same way. So he goes, oh, yeah. He says, so what do you think we should do? I said, that's not my department. That's your department. And he looked at me and he went, okay, I'll go up and rewrite the middle. And he went upstairs, rewrote the middle, and off we went and finished the song off. It was some moment, though, that I didn't think before I spoke. And what I was saying is, Paul McCartney, you've written a shit middle 8. And it wasn't good, but worked out okay in the end. I think one has to be circumspect about everything, really. You have it, thinking before I speak is a bad habit, probably.
So all the stuff you were doing, like with Sally Oldfield, Linda's Farm, Yes, the remixing, did that come later?
I did a 12-inch with Trevor with Yes, that's all. And the Animals was very interesting. Do you know who they are?
Of course.
Were?
Yes, of course.
So you know who Chaz Chandler
Yeah, I know
was?
Chaz Chandler, manager of Jimi Hendrix and bass player. And
Yeah. And he was a record producer who produced, I want to say, Slade.
Oh, he did?
I think. Anyway, whatever. It was one of those awful experiences. It couldn't have been a worse experience. My then manager, the most lovely man called Mim Scala, who I discovered, and I didn't know it, Chris Kimsey was managed by him. But at any rate, he got me this gig of co-producing an Animals comeback album. And it was to be done at Rockfield. So I show up at Rockfield, I walk into the control room, and there's this man, it was Chaz, in the middle of the control room, like right in the middle, and he was a big guy with his legs like occupying the room. It wasn't, he's no wallflower, this guy. The room was his room. And I walked in, and he went, hello, who are you? And I introduced myself and said, I'm co-producing this. You are? That's what you think, straight off to a good start. Anyway, I walk out into the studio to look at the gear, see what's going on, and there's an Ampeg SVT, huge. It's
absolutely massive, 8x10 cabinet,
massive. Yeah, that's it. 400 watts or whatever it was. Utterly inappropriate. And so I looked at this and I walked back into the control room and I said, I forgot he was the bass player, right? And I said, that amp I had no idea how we're going to record that amp. It's ridiculous for the studio. And he looked at me and he said, I ordered that amp and we're using it. Oh, okay. All right. That was my that's how we got off. Not a good start. And whatever I suggested on this album, whatever it was, whether it was stupid things like, do you think you could tune the snare higher? Or why don't we try a harmony? Or anything, he'd look at me with utter disdain and say, he had the same phrase. I can't quite remember what it was, but it was along the lines of, I've had 21 number one hit singles. Off. Oh, okay. It was very painful. The other guys were great. Eric Burden, what a character. The singer, right? He walked about with a bong. It was on the go all the time. That was him. Alan Price was a keyboard player who was delightful.
Alan was was back in the band. That's great.
It was the original band.
Wow.
I think the drummer's name was John Steele, who was very quiet. I think that was his name. And the guitar player was Hilton Valentine, who was your archetype acid casualty. It was brilliant. And it was kind of there, but not really. It was all a bit Syd Barrett. And he... I remember one day, the first record I ever bought was called Baby Let Me Take You Home by The Animals. Very first single I ever bought. And so I went up to him one day when things were quiet and I said, Hilton, you wouldn't do me a favor. You wouldn't play the start to Baby Let Me Take You Home. It was the first record I bought. It would be such a joy to hear you play it. And he looked at me, like, the half there. And he went, yeah, okay. And so he got his guitar and he sort of had to get into the mode. It was the weirdest thing. He sort of moved and then went into a pose and he played the beginning of Baby, Let Me Take You Home. I don't know if you know the song. You probably don't. Anyway, he goes through this riff. And then when it gets to the chorus, the verse, he stopped and then fell apart and went back into his sort of comatose state. It was the weirdest moment. Anyway, but a thrill hearing my favorite first single. Yeah. And then, so we finished recording. And he said, well, Chaz goes, we're going to take a break now. The break meant he was going to go and mix it without me and row me out the credits and royalties, which was interesting, but the album didn't do anything anyway, and it was just a disappointing experience. That's The Animals. Thank you.
I've had a few of those too, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got some good takeaways in the middle of the not so good ones.
Kind of. I loved Alan Price. He was delightful. And it's an experience. Every experience is a good experience, really. So I was fine.
Alan Price, I always remember his, my father had a cover of Simon Smith and the Amazing
Dancing Bear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's him.
I would go out tomorrow if... Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Alan Price.
That's a Randy Newman song.
Randy Newman song, yeah. Cover of Randy Newman song. Yeah. I love Alan Price. I'm glad to hear that he was a good guy, which is what you would expect. So, it's nice to hear that.
Everyone told me he was going to be the one who was going to be a problem, but he was a delight. It's funny how these things turn out.
I've had those experiences. You turn up to studios and people tell you the band you're about to work with, who the good person and the bad person to deal with. And it's always the opposite, isn't it?
Very often.
I think talented people like Alan Price probably just don't suffer fools. So
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So probably the people that didn't get on with him probably weren't being able to keep up with him.
Those big high-profile albums like that. I imagine I worked with the Stones. I was an assistant for Chris Kimsey on an album, and the sort of scale of everything, it's just weird. I find it weird, actually. I like the small scale feel because in a way you're freer. I feel freer when things are little. When things are too big, it's a bit it's imposing. It's over-imposing. It's too important. And all the gear, loads of gear. Yeah, which I made a Jeff Beck album not long ago.
Which one?
It's called Emotion and Commotion.
I know it very well. Fantastic record.
So the start of the record was in a big studio, the big Sarm room, and with a band and loads of gears. His tech brought down, Steve Pryor, amazing tech, brought down loads of amps and all. And we started, and it was nothing. So he and I concocted a plan of just going into my room, which was just a big room. That was it. No acoustic treatment. It was a room in Sarm. It was an ex-office, but a big room. And I had it set up really well. But as I said, no acoustics, no booth. It was just a room. And I said, let's just go in there and see what happens. So we go into my room. I said, all your amps are going to be too big. He said, well, have you got anything? I said, yeah, I've got a little Fender. It's called a Pro Junior. And to give you an idea, it's that big. And he plugged his guitar in, played a couple of notes, said, yeah, that'll do. And so I stuck it in the corner, and you know those, I don't know what they're called, those mic shields. I thought, if I stick that in front of it, I need a microphone that's vertical. Oh, that one's vertical. I'll use that one, whatever it was. Stuck a mic in front of it, put the shield in front, and we went ahead and made the album with his keyboard player in there. And I flew out to LA and recorded Vinnie Colaiuta, and his bass player, Tal Wilkenfeld, sat in the room, played her bass parts, and Jason Rebello played. We just made it up in the room. And it worked out really well. But it was so little, which made it easier. It meant that we could spend time messing about and not worrying. And that makes you feel freer to come up with stupid ideas because the clock isn't ticking in the same way. It was just, anyway, it was a good example. The big room, the expensive room didn't work. The little nothing worked. When I was presenting my idea, I had an idea for making. I've had this idea for years with him, where he is the lead vocalist, and he was reticent to begin with because he likes what he calls shredding. I hate shredding. I like mellifluous melodic playing. That's what I like, and I thought he could do it really well. He sort of did it on Blow by Blow.
Absolutely.
But I was thinking more songs, like lovely songs. And he wasn't that keen. And he said, well, send me some music. So I made up a couple of CDs for him to listen to. And I don't think one or two songs ended up on the record. But he kind of got into the idea. There's one song here. Okay, so this solo
all the gaps. He freaked out. He thought that the solo should start with a bang, and I'd comped it. What happened was he used to play endlessly, and I'd take everything, and then he'd go home, and I had this way of comping the guitar, like a vocal, but there was one big difference, which was he kept changing the tone, and I decided to ignore that, and just ignore the fact the sound changed all the time, and volume, because I could fix all that later, and just mute everything on every track apart from the bits I like. And so I had all these bits, and so it got to where I thought the solo should start, and I'd sit there, listening, and I'd be sort of moving to the groove and thinking, no, I don't want to hear him, don't want to hear him, I want to hear him here, right? And this is like 2 bars into the solo, and I'd find a little phrase. I put this little phrase in, go back, listen, hear the little phrase. Oh, that's nice. I don't want to hear him again. Don't want to hear him now. So I had all these big gaps, and I constructed this solo on a few songs like this with huge gaps, and then they crescendo the solo. I designed these solos out of all this plethora of amazing guitar playing, because I thought if they're going to be songs, they need to build, and it needs ebb and flow. And he'd come in and hear them, and he'd go, what's that? That's not a solo. And I'd have to sort of talk him through my thinking. It's great. I go, it's great. It starts, and you're in the groove, and the groove's great. And then you just tease, And so anyway, so he went with it to an extent. But it was just a weird experience for him.
That's incredible.
There was another song. Yes. Right. He said, oh, I love those church bells. What church bells, Jeff? He's going, those down, 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 down. The timing of church bells. He said that it feels so nice how it starts and then it sort of rushes. He said, I'd love to do something like that. And Jason Rebello, who's a brilliant keyboard player, we kind of figured this tune out. And the solo, the chorus, the idea was it was the church bells, right? So, not here. Right. Right, that's the church bells. But the thing is, there's a 2-bar gap before the chorus starts. And so when we were working on it, he'd constantly come in like a bar or a bar and a half early. He'd play it great, but in completely the wrong place. I'd say, Jeff, what are you doing? You're coming in the wrong place. He'd look at me, he'd go, I'm just bored waiting. Move it. Okay. It was so weird. And I move it, and it would sound great. It would sound just like the right thing. It was funny, though. He's a funny guy.
Have you worked with him since the album?
No, just parts, Ironically, I ended up doing sleeve notes for some reason. I wrote the sleeve notes and said, even though most of the artists I've worked with pretty continuously over the years, which is nice. But with Jeff, I said, I would be happy to go straight into another album with him now. That's how much I enjoyed working with him. He hates recording, so it wasn't going to happen. He sort of went off the grid and then looked for something new. And he made an album with these 2 girls, and I never really understood what was going on. It didn't register with me. But he loves going left, right, up, down. He doesn't like a path, and I understand it.
Totally, yeah. No, I appreciate that about all the great artists, bands, solo artists, whatever. They're never resting on their laurels, always trying to do new things.